Our first Tobacco Settlement Agreement Fund Oversight meeting to order, and I'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Boswell, Senator Deneen, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Webb, Representative Brown, Representative King,
Present.
Representative Pratt,
Present.
Representative Reed,
Here.
Representative Rorks,
Here.
Senator Mays Bledsoe, and Representative Dossett.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to defer the co-chair to Representative Dossett for an introduction of guests.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. And we have a new member of our staff that is with us this morning. We would like to welcome Emily Riley. We're looking forward to working with you and know you'll do a fantastic job. So welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to have you here with us today. First, I'd like to motion on the minutes from the April 13th meeting.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes will vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Now we'll move on to our agenda. And I think we have Mr. Lacefield here with us. Mr. McCloskey, if you want to come forward and start your presentation and update on the Ag Development Board.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you all today and share with what's going on at the Office of Ag Policy and Oversight of the Ag Development Funds. I was chatting right before the meeting started with my friend back there, Jeff Harper, and he asked how things were going, and Bill said, going well, the money hit the account. So that's the first thing I can report is the MSA payments are in and have been allocated. They've been received and allocated to the counties, $45,554,774 with $29.3 at the state level and $16.2 going out to our counties. That's down slightly from last year, but the inflation component of that factor has kept this a lot higher. Overall, national cigarette consumption was down 10% last year, but with the inflation component, it kept it from being as big of a decline as it was. So with these dollars being allocated in, we are in peak season now with county council meetings, literally going across the state as folks are having their meetings and deciding initial allocation of these funds at the county level. I was looking this morning at the schedule, and next week, one day alone, we have county council meetings in Washington, Floyd, Franklin, Lyon, and Garrett County. So that's a pretty good bit of travel as we're trying to cover and have staff attend each and every one of these. And that's what, thankfully, we're back to our full staff at what we're calling full staff today, and have one of our newest colleagues with us today. Savannah Hill is with us. She joined last month, and we've already got her going to county council meetings on her own and doing that. She's from Nelson County. She's a University of Kentucky Ag Econ grad and a beef producer. So we're excited to have her on our team and help to get around and cover these different county council meetings. I always joke that it would be nice if we could start maybe in Fulton and just work our way across the state, but they happen as applications come in and as needs arise. One of the projects that has been funded since 2019 is the state allocation of state funds to limited allocation counties. This program was set up to bring all of our counties up to a certain level of funding, because the allocation of these funds, as we talked, I believe last month I was with you, that it's broken down based on their historic burley dependency, tied to number of burley tobacco bases or quota we had at the time, the pounds of tobacco that were produced there in the late 90s, and then how much that tobacco dollar impacted a local community. And two of our counties, Pike and Knott, received none. But there's other counties that historically had very little on that. I think Martin County would be the lowest county that actually receives funds. Their allocation, based on the formula that was established when the county allocations went out with House Bill 611, is $55 for this year. So they would still, these counties still have to have priorities, still have to have county council meetings and talk about that. But in 2019, the state board made the decision to bring all counties up to at least $30,000. So that would work out like Martin County would receive $29,945, and then Marshall County, for example, their allocation this year would be $29,254. So they got $746 that brought them up to $30,000. This was 21 counties. The majority of them are in our far west and our far east counties. So this has been a great way to further spread these dollars across the state, and just continue every year when we do have these funds. Want to thank you all as a committee, and then all on behalf of the total General Assembly that you serve, continue appreciation for the allocation of these funds to agriculture. They are truly making a difference across Kentucky and our communities. We had last month had our April approved loans. That'd be your first page we have in the packet. We had 2 of our infrastructure loan programs. We had 7 of our beginning farm programs, 1 ag processing, and 1, the acronym is DEAL. That's for the diversification entrepreneurship through agriculture. And that is our ag business program for things that wouldn't fit in our other programs. And this one was actually an innovative group utilizing drones for application. And I know Chairman Dossett, he and I both had some ag retail experience at different times crossing through, but that's where we're at now with the technology of delivering this application via drones. We utilized all 3 of our farm credit systems. We have 3 in Kentucky: River Valley Ag, Central Kentucky Ag Credit, and Farm Credit Mid-America. All 3 last month participated with us. 2 of our frequent flyers with our community banks, and then 1 of our area development districts, which we also work with them with the participations. So a total of $1.8 million, but as I always like to report, this was perhaps the catalyst to get over $10 million in total capital investments. And again, we spread the state with these. And Senator Webb, you talked last month. We talked about, and you used your phrase I love to hear, about our international model that we've become with this program. But we participate in the National Council of State Ag Finance Programs. Bill has served in leadership positions with this in his tenure, and because of the success of this program, we're seeing interest from other states. Bill and I were just chatting this morning, and here in the last few months, we have had Zoom calls with leadership in Maryland, Alabama, and Delaware, all looking at our program and how they could do something similar. So just again, a testament to the vision from ag leadership and the General Assembly to set forth these funds. And I will stop there, and then Bill and I will tag team through what else was approved last month.
Okay. Start with page 3, give you an update on the programs that were approved. So at the top of the list is the CAPE program, County Agriculture Investment Program. You can see that $718,927 in county money to support the CAPE program. The 11 different investment areas, from making improvements to structures on the farm, hay barns, to purchasing bulls, to just about everything. Fencing is always a popular cost share item. Now, you notice Letcher County has an asterisk there, so we will denote those counties that are receiving state money, as Brian mentioned earlier. So their allocation on an annual basis is $92. So based on receiving money this year and last year, this will be the 3rd year, they're going to be able to commit $40,000 to a cost share program in Letcher County. And as reported in previous meetings, most popular cost share item right now is boundary fencing, because again, Representative King, that's not eligible on a consistent basis with any other state programs or federal programs. So that's very popular to help support farmers that or landowners that may be willing to upgrade fencing. Maybe it's 50 years old. They can upgrade their fencing, or section off new part of their fencing from the woods and increase their cattle operation. And as you all know, our mission for 22 years now is diversifying away from tobacco. Most of your tobacco producers have cattle, so this will help them expand their cattle operation. It goes towards improving the net farm income. Moving on to the deceased farm animal removal program, 2 counties were approved for $19,000. So this just supports best management practice with regards to the deceased animal program. Under shared use equipment, so the counties can utilize county money to purchase equipment that may not be feasible for a landowner or farmer to purchase. So to give you an idea of some of the equipment here, we'll start with the first one. Henry County, most popular piece of equipment to buy on a cost share basis, where it's available on a rental basis to farmers in the county. The first one in Henry County is a no-till drill. The second one for $9,750 is a post hole driver, so that helps them utilize and improve the fencing. And then under Madison County, lime spreader. We're seeing more interest in being able to rent a lime spreader to help spread fertilized lime. And then lastly, we got a hay wrapper in Madison County. So there was several years ago, there was a UK publication said that if you can get your hay stored or protected from the weather, increase the quality, not only the quality, but the volume by 30%. So that allows you to feed a third more cattle if you're able to protect your hay. And then under the youth program, 2 counties approved for $95,000 for a total of $906,064. Moving on to page 4, we've got 2 counties that amended their current CAPE program. So you can see with Barron County Conservation District, they were approved back in September for $350,000. So now they're coming back and ask for $93,000. They have a year to disperse the funds and close the program, so they'll be coming up on a year here to finish up the program. But they probably got some producers on waiting list, and if they can add additional $93,000, they can go ahead and fund those applicants that are on the waiting list. And the same thing with Caldwell-Lyon County Cattlemen Association in Caldwell County. They're just asking for additional $1,390 to address their waiting list. And next is page 5. Brian's going to...
All right, thank you. This was a unique project with the Bluegrass Land Conservancy, a nonprofit entity that works for preservation of farmland. This project was awarded funds of $409,950 that will go towards a bigger project with the USDA NRCS. Additional funding came out of the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level that has increased funding available for, again, the purchase of the development rights for this property. The way these easements work is you're restricting forever, perpetuity, the development of this property, thus keeping it in agriculture land. And this obviously has a hit to the fair market value of this. So landowners are able to be compensated the difference between the fair market value, which would reflect development opportunity, and then the agriculture use. One of the things in putting together these type of conservation easements, I had a board member used the term, and I liked it. Said you want to think more like Holsteins instead of Dalmatians. You want big spots and contiguous lands together instead of just little dots spread out across the state. So they strategically work to put these together. This part of our funding actually goes to paying the closing cost on these easements to happen, but looking at possibly bringing in a total of $28 million at the federal level with the use of these funds. They have 10.4 secured and have another pending application that's being reviewed. But it's customary from in most of my banking deals I worked with for the buyer to always pay the closing costs. You want to ensure it's your attorney for getting you clear title. You want to ensure an independent appraiser that's coming in and establishing that value. And that's the way the federal program runs. It precludes these funds for being used for closing cost. So that's what the $400,000 is going to pay the closing cost on getting the total amount, again, up to $28 million that will go to purchase these development easements on between 4 to up to 16,000 acres in Kentucky. And this Bluegrass Land Conservancy, they work in a 26 county area here in central Kentucky.
Just a second. We have one question. Representative King?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for bringing this to our attention. I just have a quick question about permanent conservation easements. Are they documented on the deed, or does a purchaser know that permanent conservation easement is attached to the property. Can you help me learn a little bit more about that?
It would be in the deed, and I've worked through some of these again as a banker, and the closing attorney always my cases, and Representative Dawson would be David Cutoff. If you can imagine him telling the story, would always go through. Now you understand what forever means. This is not just this generation. This is going on for perpetuity, and that would be upon anybody doing their due diligence to research that. There's not anything else of public record that I'm aware of besides putting it in the deed.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing none others, please proceed.
All right, next we're on page 6. It's the Drone Agra of Kentucky LLC. This was an application made to the Woodford County Agriculture Development Council for half the cost. So the request was $16,147 for a total of project cost of $32,294. So this was presented to the County Agriculture Development Council, and you can see that the plan is to be able to use aerial application of either a fertilizer or any kind of product to control disease and insects. And the benefit is, obviously, if it's wet, you can't get in the field, you can use a drone. And as explained to me yesterday, visiting with a Nicholas County producer, to some insects like armyworms, they're most active at night. And he said you could spray with a drone at night and do a better job of controlling, in this example, armyworms. So after much discussion, the county council decided only to commit $5,000 to the project, and ultimately the Ag Development Board supported that commitment of $5,000. All right, no questions. I'll move on to page 7. So it's the Madison County Farm Bureau requesting $3,896.62, which is half the cost to purchase grain bin rescue equipment. I think we presented many of these as part of our report to the Oversight Committee. This is the one that we would like to see that it doesn't get used a whole lot, but it's a safety equipment in more counties. Representative Reed are utilizing these county funds to support this kind of endeavor. And next we'll go to page 8. So Bourbon County Fair and Horse Show requested $25,000 in county funds to support a $50,000 improvement in the electricity panels, concrete wash rack, and other details of part of a new livestock barn that's going to be funded out of the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. Their fairs and shows program, they can provide up to $100,000. So they're going to use part of that money to match these specific improvements as part of their new livestock barn.
All right, Chair Dossett has a question for you.
Bill and Brian, I want to go back to the what was done for the drones, the approval on that. What's the timeline that they will actually start operating, or were we told anything?
I think we plan on doing this year. Identified 5 counties that he would be able to start immediately. There's not a whole lot.
That would be interesting to see those that machinery actually operating right there. I always go back and think of seeing the planes and helicopters flying over there at home, and it would be interesting to see how they're going to do that with the drones. But
well, and that discussion came up even more. Some of these fields that'll be serviced would not be big enough for even to get the traditional aerial application. So beyond maybe a more efficient, we're actually going to be able to target farm operations that wouldn't have access to this.
okay,
I think it'll be more interest. Sounds like a field trip is in your future.
well, that was what Representative Reed just suggested, and I think it would be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Please proceed. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Webb has a question.
I'd be glad to volunteer my acreage in Woodford County to get rid of those buttercups around March. So it's just saying.
That wouldn't be a far drive.
It's exciting. It's exciting.
Okay, now proceed.
Okay, I think we're on page 9 now.
Okay, you'd finished that one, so we're good. All right, on page 9, we have a project from Murray State University Center of Agricultural Hemp. Kentucky was a pioneer in hemp with the passing of the 2014 Farm Bill. We I think had 6 producers that year raising hemp, and continued as interest in this crop grew. Early on, the Ag Development Board decided to make an investment in one project of each of the 3 primary uses, with our fiber, with seed for human consumption, and then the CBD production that gained in popularity leading up to 2019. Then they established a policy that any future projects would be limited to education and research and must be tied to a university. Murray State University early on established itself as a leading university with work in hemp, and established the Center for Agricultural Hemp. Located in Callaway County, there near Murray, is Hempwood, which is the only company, to what I understand, in the world that is producing hardwood floors out of hemp material, out of the fiber, and are successfully doing this, and are struggling sourcing the hemp at the local level. There were many producers that had very negative experiences raising hemp, and there are limited risk management tools available, like we have with traditional row crops that these acres would be replacing. So this application came to us as a collaborative effort between growers, between the university there at Murray State, and the Hempwood Company, to look at a research project that would also provide a price support or a floor for these producers electing to grow this crop. This would allow research to be done. Murray will gather the data as they work to establish which varieties and management practices are better for producing this, and farmers have a safety net to come in and know there will be at least some level of payment in case there is a complete failure on the crop or the yields are not to where they would need to be. This total project cost is from Ag Development side, $247,000. Of that, Murray's putting in $25,000, and the rest of the matching fund is actually coming from the company there that is buying this. This flooring is gaining in popularity as a lot of buildings are having to be at net neutral or zero carbon, and aware of a couple of schools in Kentucky that are utilizing this flooring. So it's fascinating and very proud we have this in Kentucky, and we think that this can be a market that is sustainable. This is a 2-year project, and the hope is this, after 2 years, enough research will be done, and we'll see the farmers producing this and seeing this company, which is growing, be able to source the majority, if not all, of their products from Kentucky. And I included in the packet a great article on the fiber hemp, showing some of the opportunities that we have.
All right, I'll move on to page 16, give you an update on a new startup business, Sunflower Fuels LLC. So they were approved for $150,000 as part of a $440,000 project that included a feasibility study to look in growing energy crops, miscanthus, and other biomass grasses in eastern Kentucky on reclaimed mine lands. Thank you, Senator Webb. And in eastern Kentucky to see if it's feasible as a scale-up types project. So expect this to be completed by the end of 2024, and would have a business plan as a result of this feasibility study that would indicate whether it'd be possible or feasible to grow biomass grasses as support biofuels in eastern Kentucky.
All right, on page 17 is our final project from the Purchase Co-op. Mayfield Grain, which is a regional grain elevator, was destroyed in the December 2021 tornadoes that affected Kentucky. Last year, the owners of Mayfield Grain, or I guess actually went throughout the year and then made the decision early in 2023 that they will not be rebuilding this facility. This leaves a vacuum in an area that touches a lot of counties there for an elevator or a market for their grain. Been a number of farm meetings taking place, looking at options to establish. And one option they're exploring is looking at establishing a co-op to rebuild this market, basing it largely on the model of what Hopkinsville Elevator has been able to do. But obviously, this is going to be a very capital-intense project, and so the first step is getting a feasibility study to see if this is going to be practical. And so this is what the application presented at the state level was for. The matching funds come from the Kentucky corn growers, and I think this is just a great testament of the synergy that we get in Kentucky with collaborative efforts and seeing a commodity group putting their funds in to help their producers establish a market. So it's a total of 15,500 with half coming from the state and half coming from the Kentucky corn growers.
Okay, Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering what these 300 to 350 farm families have been doing with their crop since that was destroyed.
Well, that's been the concern is those bushels have gone somewhere, and so that's working on how to be able to bring those bushels back. I think there's been a lot of grain storage that has been built. Again, when you've got the local markets, you have more flexibility with delivery at harvest, but that'll be reflected in the study because you want to make sure you're going to be able to have those bushels back. But the short answer to no, there's no short answers from Brian. The answer for that is the burden has become more on the farmers, that they're either having to haul further, so that is increasing their transportation cost, or sell more at market at the harvest time, which usually has the highest basis, and take an economic hit. So either way, it's costing the producers more to sell their grain somewhere else.
Based on the location of these counties, can one of the study data points be, did they take it out of state? I mean, you can't blame them for finding a market, but if they can, let us know if they had to go out of state to market their product.
Well, I can say it did. There are a number of markets across the state line that I know that they were utilizing.
Thank you.
I believe that. Well, no, they will. They'll have to find it, and that's what they'll look at. Mm-hmm. We did a similar a study. I was actually worked for Hopkinsville Elevator at the time when we had this engaged for looking at one in Central Kentucky, and that's exactly what it looks at. Is what are the opportunities, and then where are the other markets that you're going to be competing with?
Thank you, Madam
It's a
Chair.
great question.
And we've had some of the corn growers utilize the Ag Finance Program to increase their storage capacity with grain bins. So they are using the Ag Finance Program to do that.
Anything else?
And that and the last thing in your packet is the press release listing all these.
I don't see any questions. Anything else you want to leave us with?
No, like a field trip would be a great opportunity to get out of Frankfort sometime, but always a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you for your work.
Well, thank you both for your time and for your service. All right, I see our next guest has made it. So our next agenda item is the Kentucky Double Dollars Program, and Mr. Richards, please join us. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. It has been, let me see, well, thank you. And I'm joined today with Kimmy Ishmael, who many of you have met over the last two sessions. So a lot has happened since the last time we talked. Here in Kentucky, we're still, recovering from tornadoes, from flooding, things like that. So 2022 was a challenging year. In addition to that, I want to, bring up some other things that we have been involved in. So we were asked, and I participated in this task force to help inform the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. That new national strategy was released back in October. We also submitted another USDA GusNIP proposal to support the SNAP fruits and vegetables part of Kentucky Double Dollars. We did that last year. I am sorry to say, we did not get that grant, and it was really discouraging. And we have done a lot since then. For one, there's a huge demand in this country for that grant, and they only had $38 million in fiscal year 2022, and only 8 applicants got funded for that. And our analysis showed that those 8 were primarily on the West Coast, on the East Coast, and primarily in urban areas, right? So that's a red flag. And I have been on a bit of a tear for the last year, pointing that out to folks every opportunity I've had. The really good thing is that Kentucky Ag Development Fund and kudos to the Ag Policy team stepped up and said, all right, we will cover that SNAP portion for Kentucky Double Dollars for the next 2 years. So our goal had been to let's at least keep the program at the level we were at in 2022, so we don't lose any momentum in the state. And we also then just submitted another, just in early May 6th, I think, submitted the next round. Meanwhile, I was asked to testify in front of the U.S. Senate Agriculture Subcommittee on Food and Nutrition in December, and I did that at the request of Senator Cory Booker and Senator Mike Braun, and specifically just told him what's going on in Kentucky, and how the issues of food access, food security, coupled with the opportunity to support agriculture, especially beginning farmers and disadvantaged farmers. Commissioner Quarles also submitted a written letter at that time too. And then, in part of the bigger efforts, and we've been talking to you all for the last couple of years about this, thanks to sponsor of co-chair Myron Dossett, we were introduced House Bill 384 this past year that would set up this fund, the Healthy Farm and Food Innovation Fund, that would to respond to the most immediate need to come up with the matches required for these federal grants. Not only the GusNIP grant, but a number of other USDA grants have matches anywhere from 25 to 50%. But I think in our conversations with you all over the last 2 years, we're all realizing that we have a much bigger need and situation in the state. And then lastly, just this past April, I was invited to be on a panel at the National Food as Medicine Summit in Boston. I was honored to be there. I was also a little surprised, right? There were over 300 attendees there. There were only 2 people in all those 300 folks that had any experience in agriculture. Myself and former Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman. I'm pleased to say that there was a lot of conversations then about the importance of where food comes from and the connections between agriculture, food security, all of these issues. And a couple things, right? I mean, this is some updated information. And I think from our friends at Feeding Kentucky, you'll get even more updates about, food security in the state. But, we have a big problem in this country, and a big problem that's costing us a lot of money. 85% right there, 85% of healthcare spending in this country is related to diet-related disease or illnesses, right? Stuff that we can take care of, right? Stuff that if we're proactive on, we can save money and make people healthier. And some of these things I didn't know about, but this was presented there, right? And I think it's a response to the opportunities that we have when we incorporate food and agriculture into this approach. And again, I did not know that 1 in 10 U.S. jobs are directly supported by food and agriculture. I bet it's higher in Kentucky, but that's just my speculation. Food is medicine. If you haven't heard that phrase yet, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it a lot. from a Madison Avenue point of view, it is a really good catchphrase, right? And I'm not so keen on it, but anyway, that's what we got, right? But that's what we're looking at, right? And you know, again, whether it's from a Medicare, Medicaid, cost saving point of view, from healthcare providers, everything, it is up and coming, right? Even in DC, right? When I was in December, that whole testimony was about food as medicine. And you know that an issue is finally getting traction when folks in DC are talking about it, right? So again, I'm just going to breeze through it, other than the fact that, in Kentucky, we got problems with food security. We rank terrible when it comes to nutritional health for our state. Again, those aren't numbers there. Our rankings are anything to be proud of, but they also do represent a great opportunity. And again, these numbers, right? I am really pleased to say that Community Farm Alliance, along with a whole bunch of partners, including funding with ag development, we have three pretty robust programs that directly address some of these issues and are directly tied to supporting Kentucky farmers. After all, that's what Community Farm Alliance does, right? And Kentucky Ag Development Fund is supporting the Farmers Market Support Program and Kentucky Double Dollars. They have done that now for coming up on 6 years. What is 23? I'm going to take my shoes off to cipher that out. At least 6 years for that. And these aren't like one-off standalone programs. They are really part of, again, a much more bigger effort that all these cogs in these wheels are so important to actually make things happen. Again, one of those is a farmers market support program. So, we, along with KDA, help provide technical assistance to Kentucky farmers markets with the goal of making them more sustainable and also making them more professional and more sophisticated in terms of marketing, in terms of outreach, in terms of pricing, everything, right, for the long-term sustainability. And just, in the last 2 or 3 years here, right, it's been 41 markets in 31 counties, and consistently every year about 1,000 farmers are impacted through our programs here. And that $146,000, that is Kentucky Ag Development Funds specifically. And we did some testimony last November in front of the Interim Joint Committee about response to East Kentucky flooding. This is just one slide from that. But I think one thing that we learned last year was that over these last 5, 6, 7 years of efforts to support, local food systems and farmers markets, we've actually created this infrastructure, in Kentucky and specifically in Appalachia, right? Infrastructure that when the flooding happened was able to jump in right away, right? So, these four free markets, there was a collaborative effort there, but, responding and creating these 4 free markets, again, allowed farmers to continue to receive income, and those folks, especially those food insecure folks, again, to get food, right? And all this is supported by this collaborative effort. Some of these other slides are just going to be repeats from what I've said over the past years. Again, Kentucky Double Dollars. Goal is to increase sales to farmers, and, make more food affordable and accessible to folks who really need it the most, and to leverage all these federal dollars that are coming into Kentucky and support farmers. And again, Kentucky Double Dollars is actually 4 incentive programs supporting the WIC and the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition programs, as well as SNAP fruits and vegetables, and then the SNAP meat, eggs, and dairy. And again, outside of the SNAP fruits and vegetables, the other 3 are supported by Kentucky Ag Development Funds, plus other private funds that come into us on a yearly basis, through some foundations. Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky is a big supporter. I'm really proud to say that this year, CoBank, who I didn't know existed but is connected with Farm Credit, is helping out this year. Because, our goal this year was to maintain what we did last year, right? Those markets. Well, unbeknownst to us, we had about a half a dozen other markets that say, oh, we want to be part of this year, right? So that means that we're, working on raising more funds for this. So we've had to put a number of markets on kind of a waiting list, but we're getting funding and we're going to, roll them off. And I feel pretty confident that all the markets who requested to be part of Kentucky Double Dollars will be a part of it this year. And I apologize that I put the 2021 graphic there, but that's just a snapshot of where our efforts were last year in 2022 in Kentucky. This is part of this report. We did this 5-year impact report that you all have a copy of, to show. And we started receiving ag development funds in 2017. Up until that point, it was mainly private philanthropy that supported this. One thing to point out is that 2021 was a high point, right? And that was largely due to COVID and an increase in pandemic EBT funds that came into the state. And, we honored all of that. And then we hit 2022, right? A lot of that PEBT funding and overall SNAP funding dropped. And then we had the floods in East Kentucky, and it shut down at least 4 markets, basically for most of the season. So that's why 2022 is lower than it was in 2023. Again, the last thing, and again, thank you so much to Representative Dossett for sponsoring this bill. But I think in order to sustain these type of programs, not just the one that CFA runs, but other programs that are out there, some of them are on a local level, some of them are on a multi-county level, is creating this fund, right? And, creating this fund that, is administered right now, I think we were saying administered with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and I think they're still receptive. We'll see with whoever the new commissioner is. But the fund is able to not only, receive state funds, but also private funds. Again, as more and more healthcare providers, and the MCOs have supported this project for CFA, Passport, WellCare, United, Humana Foundation just gave us a new grant this year to help support these efforts too. But by having that fund set up and capable of receiving, all these funds, it really sets Kentucky up to be on the same level as how many other states have set these funds up? Is it like 14? I'm thinking, and it allows, folks like us, when we make a GusNIP application, to show that there's all our sources to provide that 50% match. And it allows us, to bring down more of those federal dollars. And I think we're working, or at least Kimmy and Representative Dossett are in constant communications, and we'll see what we can bring to you all for the next session. So that's it for me. I am happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your update and presentation. And we'll start with Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In years past, electronic checkout at farmers markets has been explained to me as a barrier to taking advantage of these programs. Are we doing any better on that across the state? Can you give me an update on electronic checkouts?
I think the answer is yes, right? The Department of Agriculture has really been handling that and supporting. So if a farmer's market wants to accept SNAP EBT, the first stop is to go to Department of Agriculture. Although our team, they'll reach out to us and we'll talk to them about everything that's involved, how to apply for it. But Department of Agriculture can then help with the actual getting of the machine or the costs associated with that.
Thank you. Chair Dossett.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a moment to applaud Kimmy. she was persistent and very enthusiastic as far as working with me on what we put together for House Bill 384. I will be filing that again. We were able to get it there to the through committee. We were late in the session and weren't able to get it to a vote. But I want to take a moment and applaud her and let you know, pat her on the back. She worked extremely hard as far as getting this legislation put together. Thank you, Kimmy.
Yes, she is amazing. Right now, her attentions have turned to the Farm Bill, and we have sent members to DC. Well, starting with me in December, we have had members and staff in DC every month working on the Farm Bill. You're scheduled to go back in June, right? Specifically to talk about, or try to encourage Congress to put more money into the GusNet program, right? To meet the needs out there.
Fantastic. I don't see any other updates. I'm well aware of your work in Fayette County with the double dollars and programs. It's been wildly successful, very
Yes.
supportive of the effort, and it's critical to have more people have more access to fresh food. So thank you very much for your work and your updates.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our last item on the agenda, the Farms to Food Banks. I think we have Ms. Vaughn and Ms. Wheeler here with us. Welcome.
It's the end of his presentation. No.
Do you have a presentation?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I have it on there.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you all so much for having us. So my name is Cassidy Wheeler. For those of you all who don't know me, I'm the advocacy coordinator with Feeding Kentucky. I'll let my partner introduce herself too before we get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Vaughn, the programs director for Feeding Kentucky and our Farms to Food Banks program.
So we have some new information for you on the state of hunger in Kentucky, and then we'll kind of get into our various programs. So we just got from Feeding America actually a couple of weeks ago the new numbers for food insecurity in Kentucky from 2021. So as of 2021, we're looking at 1 in 8 adult Kentuckians who are food insecure and 1 in 6 children. So these numbers have stayed about the same. We sometimes see 1 in 7 adults, sometimes 1 in 8, but pretty consistently these are similar numbers. And then here are the counties with the highest food insecurity rates in Kentucky. So Wolfe County is our #1 food insecure county, and actually Wolfe County ranks 7th in the top 10 food insecure counties in the country. So, and then the other counties listed here are not super far behind. So Wolfe County's food insecurity rate is, I think, 24%, and then these other counties are between 21 and 23%. So here's some interesting numbers, and if you look at the handouts I've given you, you have kind of each page is a different year, 2019, 2020, 2021, so you can kind of see the breakdown of food insecurity across the state. But some interesting kind of highlights of them is that food insecurity actually went down by 1.5% from 2019 to 2021. And we can attribute that to a lot of the policies that were happening during the pandemic, right? We saw a much greater need for food, like growing rates of hunger and food insecurity, and policymakers like yourselves obviously helped pass policy to combat that. So a lot of federal policies address this nationally too, so looking at ARPA funds, the SNAP emergency allotments, the flexibilities for serving school meals to kids, all of those policies worked very well. They did what they intended to do. So it's very exciting to have the hard numbers to see, right, that your efforts were not in vain. Something also interesting, so like I said, food insecurity went down 1.5%, which is hugely significant. And in Kentucky, that is 65,000 people. So, we managed to pull 65,000 people out of food insecurity from 2019 to 2021. So obviously that is hugely significant. And then also, if you're looking at the data from 2020 compared to 2021, you'll see that the average meal cost in Kentucky went up over 30 cents. So it went from $2.79 a meal to $3.11. So that's a pretty big jump. But in spite of the rise in food costs, our food insecurity rate remained the same, which is about 12.9%, right? So, again, we'll see that despite the fact that there were, rising food costs, inflation, things like that, we managed, because of these sound policy, to keep our food insecurity rate the same. And so, like I said, we're very excited to have these numbers because, again, they show that these policy solutions worked. We are pushing for some permanent policy changes because obviously a lot of these pandemic era programs are now going away. So we're afraid that these numbers will revert back to 2019 levels. So something to think about as we're going into next session, right, is how do we create some permanent policy change to make sure that we're not going backwards. Yeah, and so this is the 2021 Food Insecurity Report. So you have this in your handout. And like I said, you can kind of compare this to years past, but this really gives you a rundown of what the food insecurity rate is in Kentucky and how it looks on a county by county basis. So I do want to point out, especially if you compare this to 2019, you'll see that we have really improved our food insecurity on a county by county basis. And even though the food insecurity rate for the state remained the same in 2020 and 2021, you'll see that it actually went down by counties. So when you compare them, right, in 2020, you see a lot more dark colored counties, and so that's higher food insecurity rate. And that number, most of them are not that dark color in 2021, and you see a lot more lighter colored counties in 2021, and that's a lower food insecurity rate. So if we're looking at it county by county, we're actually doing better with food insecurity. And then I think that this is something that we talked about last year, but Kentucky does have one of the highest rates of hunger for older adults and seniors. So we are number 2 in the nation for hunger for older adults aged 50 to 59. And we are, I think we're maybe 4th in senior hunger. We're top 5. So we have a very high rate both of child hunger and older adult and senior hunger here. And then this is just highlighting what we've already talked about. Our food insecurity rate right now is 12.9%. And then, this key here shows who is eligible to receive SNAP benefits and who isn't. And then we saw, so these are some older numbers, but we have been seeing a rise in need since some of these pandemic era policies ended. So it's still pretty relevant, right? So we saw an increase of 18% nationally in food insecurity once the pandemic hit, and our food banks are seeing a much higher demand. So kind of the way that our partners have experienced it is the pandemic hit, we saw an increased need, then there were policy solutions that passed that kind of made that level out a little bit. And then as these policies are ending, we're seeing a much, much higher need from the food banks and the food pantries, right? And it's very complicated on their end as well because of inflation and the high cost of food and the supply chain. They're having a very hard time buying food, essentially, both getting it and also purchasing it, right? The purchasing power of their federal funding and their donations isn't going as far. So even though we are seeing such a huge need from, Kentuckians, our neighbors, it's harder for the food banks and pantries to meet that need than it was in the initial stages of the pandemic.
So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to address these issues that Cassidy explained. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, we are a statewide nonprofit organization that is made up of a network of 7 food banks and over 800 partner feeding agencies. We serve, on average, about 50,000 Kentuckians each week, and 85 million meals were served to Kentuckians in need in our last fiscal year. this is a little bit talking about our needs that we could use some help with. We could use more brick and mortar infrastructure, cold storage, continued flexibility in school and federal nutrition programs, and fewer barriers to access SNAP benefits. And you're going to talk about that later. But I wanted to talk about farms to food banks. That's really my specialty. So farms to food banks redistributes agricultural products from farmers needing a market and gives those to Kentuckians in need. There's three main goals of farms to food banks: to increase access, to support farmers, and to reduce waste of edible food. So last year, we distributed 3.4 million pounds of produce to 119 counties. There was one county that did not receive produce. That was Ballard County, and which is over in western Kentucky. And it's my understanding that they were offered produce but weren't able to accept it at the time. And it doesn't necessarily mean they didn't get any produce at all. They just didn't get produce from farms to food banks. So we distribute 28 different types of produce and the equivalent of 5.6 million meals. So the impact on farmers, last year we worked with 276 farmers from 53 counties in Kentucky. On average, a farmer got about $3,400, but 12 farmers received more than $10,000. So you kind of, it varies the quantities that the farmers are bringing in. We've taken something as small as a 10-pound sack of potatoes to as large as a semi-truck full of goodies. So it just depends on the size of the farm. And just here recently, starting this year, we were awarded a grant called LFPA. That stands for the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program. It's a USDA grant that was awarded to the Kentucky Department of Ag, and they subawarded these funds to us. But it's a 2-year grant period, and we are trying to focus on purchasing protein items with these funds because the appropriation that we get from the state is for fresh produce only. So we're trying to utilize this money to expand and get protein items as well. And we've been working with, one of the goals of this grant is to work with socially disadvantaged producers. So we've been reaching out, trying to find farmers who fit that criteria and are wanting to work with us. And we're able to pay a little bit more closer to retail price for the products.
So we want to be able to continue this work that Sarah's doing with LFPA. So currently the Farms to Food Banks program is only for produce, and Sarah does such an amazing job with it that we have really kind of hit a wall with what we're able to do. We're kind of maxed out on produce. So really, I mean, like, we get to a point every year where Sarah has basically bought all the produce that is available to us. So we're looking at expanding the program because, we obviously have the ability to do so. There is a need, right, both for farmers, for folks in need of food, and to make sure that farmers' products aren't going to waste. I do want to thank you all very much for your support of the program. We really appreciate you all funding Farms to Food Banks in the budget every other year. And as session kind of comes closer, I will certainly be reaching out to all of you to talk about, what the Farms to Food Banks program in future looks like. But we're really wanting to expand the program. So we're going to be asking for a $1 million line item in this year's budget. So right now, like I said, we're really limited to produce, and we want to expand it to include protein. This is something we've been talking about. This is a need we're seeing from, our food banks, our farmer partners, etc. And then we also want to incorporate an element working with youth. So, bringing in programs like FFA and 4-H. We want to, bring in the youth, and kind of the idea being that, the long-term goal of bringing in youth and getting them into farming and agriculture as a career, right, making it more sustainable. So these are kind of the two ways that we're looking at expanding the program. And like I said, continuing this work that we've done with our LFPA grant. So again, we really appreciate all of the
Just a
support.
second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Representative Webb? Senator Webb? Sorry.
I've been both. We answered anything. I would just ask what your vision of the incorporation of protein would look like. I'm not going to hold you to it, but what give us an indication of what your intentions are.
Well, we would like to work with local producers, and we do require that the protein is USDA was processed in a USDA inspected facility. But
are you working with existing agencies? Existing associations like the cattlemen. I see FFA and 4-H. I think that's. I think we all can relate to that system. Have you talked to cattle producers or the swine producers or goat producers, or seeing how if other states are doing it and maybe a model for that? Because I'm all about animal protein, and as a producer, but I just was going to kind of curious as to how you would incorporate that.
Well, we've partnered with the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association and also the Pork Producers Association, a lot of our commodity groups, and we would hope to continue working with them. They've donated money to us in the past to use to purchase protein, and we really appreciate their partnership. But yes, we would certainly plan to continue working with them.
Well, but if we're going to ask for a $1 million appropriation, I would like to have a plan in place and have the stakeholder input and have a model that we could hang our hat on that $1 million appropriation. So between now and then, and because we're already starting budget work, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And other states who run farms to food banks programs, some of them they include protein in their farms to food banks models. And, like Sarah said, we have these partnerships already, and we are, getting donations, and in some instances, maybe purchasing protein, right? Depending on, right? So it's more about kind of incorporating it into a more sustainable program, but that is something that we'll definitely hash out the details of. I think, Sarah and Mike Halligan from God's Pantry and I have kind of talked about maybe this summer trying to really nail down the details of it. So that's something that we can provide you with.
And Hunters for the Hungry as well. So we've done that before.
Yes, because in the past we've never had any substantial funding that allowed us to purchase protein. So it's kind of new for us being able to do so. But that's what we're hoping. We're learning a lot with the LFPA grant, and we're meeting a lot of new farmers. There's a whole untapped market of meat that we have never explored before. So we're very excited to learn more. And
that is kind of the excellent thing about LFPA is that, if y'all fund us to expand to protein, it won't be our first rodeo, right? We won't be making our mistakes with y'all. We're doing it right now with the LFPA grant. So hopefully, that will also inform, we'll know what has gone well and what needs to be changed.
Thank you. Representative King?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one observation and 2 questions, if I may. Thank you. Can we go back to slide 6, please? There we go. I track the unemployment numbers every month as they come in to us as legislators, and I notice the direct correlation of these are our highest unemployment counties in the state. So referring back to your map for the 2021 data, do you see that correlation overall? Is it as simple as in our areas that folks are more employed, that this is less of a problem and it's directly tied to unemployment? Is it that simple, or are there other situations?
I think yes. They are related. I don't think that it is cause and effect of one necessarily, right? Like I don't think that it is simply like, oh, people are unemployed, so that's making them hungry, because we obviously know that there are a multitude of factors at play with food insecurity. But I think, the greater kind of structural systemic causes, right? Like, we know that southeastern Kentucky obviously often is struggling because of, like lack of infrastructure, lack of support, et cetera. So I think we have maybe this, greater causation of multiple kind of systemic issues that are creating unemployment, which is contributing to food insecurity. So yes and no. I definitely think the two are related for sure.
Okay, and then in request that the General Assembly address that, I think we are, as far as getting more people employed and improving that workforce participation rate. That comes up in every conversation we have here in Frankfort. And then my final question is, looking at the map and knowing these are our 1, 4, 5, 6 highest food insecurity counties, is there any merit to diverting some of the help from the lighter green areas and getting more into these folks, or is that heresy and a logistical nightmare? Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's a good question, and I think I would like to think more, look more about what that would actually look like, because I do think, for example, God's Pantry in Lexington does an amazing job, but they have the biggest service area in the state. They are serving the most counties, and they are serving all but maybe 3 counties of Eastern Kentucky, which obviously, that is an enormous ask. I don't think that, I think that in all of Kentucky, we see huge areas of need. But yeah, I think looking at where could we specifically divert funds to is not a bad idea, or maybe not even funds, maybe structural support, maybe volunteer work, maybe awareness campaigns. So yeah, I think these kind of regional focus of like, okay, these counties they're doing better, so let's look at these kind of darker counties. I think that's a good idea. I like that direction. I think that I would like to see, I think it would depend on what that actually looked like. But yeah, I think that that's a good inclination for sure.
Thank you. Representative Rourke?
Thank you. On slide 16, you mentioned several needs that the organization has, including brick and mortar infrastructure, cold storage. With those types of physical infrastructure, do you imagine like one-time allocations or like one central location, or are you imagining something more spread out throughout the state?
Do you want to take that?
Well, I was just going to say, like, specifically in regards to the tornado that happened in Western Kentucky, I know that the warehouse there at the pad warehouse in Mayfield was destroyed, and they have a temporary site in Paducah. So there were some, and then the flooding also destroyed lots of pantries not lots of pantries, but it damaged lots of pantries and destroyed a couple pantries in Eastern Kentucky. So, and we do have some funders who have stepped up to try to help rebuild and expand especially in regards to the cold storage. But those continue to be needs that, and even like something that a food pantry may have never thought of, like to have a generator on hand in case the power goes out. That up until like the past year or two, that may not have been something that was on their minds, but now it's becoming something that might be necessary, because when you've got valuable items, perishable items, you need some way to keep them safe to eat if the power goes out.
I think too, if we are looking at expanding our Farms to Food Banks program to include protein, that will require more infrastructure, more cold storage, right? You can't just let meat sit anywhere. And, I've visited various pantries, like I'm thinking specifically of God's Outreach in Richmond. I don't know if any of you all have been there, but they have a huge food pantry. There's a big need in Madison County. And so they're always expanding, and I think a lot of their infrastructure needs are met with donations. But when I was visiting there, I think about a month ago, they were, telling me we would like to expand produce, but we don't have the cold storage. So, and it kind of comes and it goes, right? Sometimes we talk with food banks and pantries, and what they're saying is like, we don't have enough food. And then sometimes they're saying, well, we've had to turn away donations because we don't have the space. Which, the other thing is, Martin mentioned the Farm Bill. That's something that we're kind of working with is TFAP funding, right? That's, the federal program that food banks use to dispense food once a month, but it also includes storage and equipment. So there are several different avenues that we could explore for that. And, you know, like Sarah said, we have, I think, almost 900 food pantries across the state. Some of them are just, you know, they don't even have like a separate building. They're simply like working out of a church or something like that. And then some of them are huge, like their buildings are comparable to food bank sizes. So there are lots of different needs.
And just one follow-up. In terms of, we've talked a little bit about, obviously our goal here is to make sure that more people are employed so that they, you know, don't need assistance. But ultimately, you mentioned fewer barriers to access to SNAP. With that, what are the biggest barriers that you're seeing that, you know, we could make a difference in?
Well, several. There are many barriers, right? So the majority of SNAP recipients actually are people who are unable to work. So 73% of SNAP households in Kentucky have children, and about 40% of them have seniors or disabled adults, right? So we obviously do see SNAP recipients who are working adults, and the majority of them are working already. So, you know, the anti-hunger advocates, including myself, we're very concerned about the conversations happening on the federal level about time limits and work reporting requirements, right? Because, again, we know that the people who are receiving SNAP who are able to work are working. And I think a big barrier that I see for folks receiving SNAP is the application process and the reporting requirements, right? I mean, like, I know every year when I do my taxes, when I hit submit, I'm like, well, I hope all that was right, because, you know, I'm not great at that. So, I mean, navigating these kinds of cumbersome applications, especially for folks who already have a lot of struggles. You know, we see a lot of SNAP recipients who, for example, are single moms. You know, their biggest concern is feeding their kids, paying their bills. It's difficult to navigate these application process. It's almost impossible to get through on a phone call. You may not have the right tools to access it online. You may not have internet, maybe not laptops. So these kinds of cumbersome reporting processes are very much a barrier.
Thank you. Representative Reed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's the qualifying definition that you all use, or what's the metric for insecure? What's that dynamic look like?
So we use Feeding America's standard, and I'll be honest, off the top of my head, I'm not sure that I remember it correctly, but it has to do with, like, have you not had access to food in the past week? Have you not been able to replace food that maybe, like, if there has been some sort of, you know, disaster or something that has gone bad? Have you not been able to purchase food? Do you not know where your next meal is? It's like those sorts of questionnaires. I can get you the specific metric that they use, though.
But yes, it's about having consistent access to nutritious, like, food to nourish your body. So you might be filling your belly, but it's not with.
Or if we see a lot of folks who are eating like one meal a day. So yeah, it's that sort of thing. Like, are you getting 3 meals a day? Is it enough to nourish you? Do you know where your next meal is coming from? If something happened, could you replace that food, etc.?
So is it based on calorie intake, like the 2,000 calorie intake suggestion?
I'm not sure about that, but we can get you that information.
Does that fall in at all with that metric?
I don't think it's as much caloric as it is, like, what are you eating? Would this be considered, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we see a lot of folks who maybe will eat for a meal like a can of peaches and a piece of bread. And, you know, obviously that's not a nutritious or well-rounded meal.
Thank you. Chair Dossett?
Yes, real briefly, I want to come back to the issue you were talking about on the applications for the SNAP benefits. I think it's going to be incumbent upon us as legislators, whether in the House or the Senate, to encourage the cabinet to become more customer friendly to these individuals applying, because as you mentioned, they may not have access to email. The other thing is, a young single mother may be making an application while they're trying to work. They do not have the ability to make phone calls at any time. They're on there for 30 minutes, an hour in the queue to be answered, or they get the call back and they may call back, but that individual is unable to answer the phone at the time they call. So they should be returning a phone call back to those individuals that making application. But I think it's something, as I said, we as legislators need to make sure we encourage the cabinet to become more customer friendly to help these individuals be able to access these type of opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out, because that is absolutely so true. And there's lots of room for administrative advocacy changing either, the application requirements, the reporting requirements. We have an elderly simplified application that is for seniors who are accessing SNAP to make it easier on them. We could definitely stand to have more folks who are doing SNAP outreach. That is a very understaffed, underfunded area. I think you're right on the money, right? That is a need that we have, and there are administrative opportunities to simplify that.
Thank you. I know you have a few more slides.
Just a couple.
Okay.
Okay, so finally, I wanted to hit on our Kentucky Kids Eat program. So this is a program that we run in tandem with Share Our Strength. So we have specifically a No Kid Hungry director her entire job is focused on feeding kids in Kentucky. So we do a lot of specifically trying to bolster school meals, address feeding outside of school, right? So doing like summer meals, supper, et cetera, et cetera. And I did want to give you all a brief update on Senate Bill 151 that passed the session before this past one. So we have some numbers on how that has impacted schools in Kentucky, and they're really amazing. It had a huge positive impact. So I want to thank you all once again for supporting this policy and helping us get it passed. So Senate Bill 151, for those of you who aren't familiar, made it so schools could use up to 15 minutes of instructional time during the classroom for kids to eat breakfast. And also for those of you all who don't know me, I used to be a public school teacher, so I was very excited about this. So this removed barriers for kids to accessing breakfast. There are lots of reasons why kids wouldn't be able to eat breakfast. For example, I had a lot of students who their buses would be late, or, I think my school started at 7:20, so they maybe didn't want to have breakfast at 6:45, which seems fair to me. And so not only did it eliminate barriers for kids to eat breakfast, but it also helped schools getting more federal reimbursement. So a big problem that school nutrition directors I've talked with recently have told me about is that they're not able to afford quality, nutritious meals. So school meals have a pretty high standard of, what nutritious standards they have to meet according to USDA. And I've had multiple school nutrition directors tell me, like, we can't afford these meals, or we can't get the food that we want. So in the past couple of years, we've seen food prices rise in schools about 20%, which is, of course, enormous. So we do have this example from Harlan County. So their new school nutrition director told us that in just one of their schools last year, they served more than 10,000 meals in September than they had the year previously. And again, this was just at one school. And then their federal reimbursement also increased by over $26,000. So again, we're seeing, 10,000 more meals served, right? More kids are getting breakfast, and we're seeing schools are getting more reimbursement so that they can provide these quality, nutritious meals. So it was a very, very successful policy. Thank you all so much for your support. We are exploring some more policy solutions, so we don't have anything permanent in the works, but we are thinking about doing some more work around reducing barriers to school meals. So I will keep you all updated on that. And again, thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. Are there any more additional questions or comments? All right, Ms. Vaughn, Ms. Wheeler, thank you so much for your presentation today, and we look forward to hearing more about your requests maybe in the next month or so.
Yes, thank you all so much, and I will definitely get you all that information.
Great.
Yes, thank you.